Every Muslim is told the same thing. Islam allows men to have sex slaves. We are told that when war happens, women become property. They are the spoils of war. You don't need to marry them. You don't need their consent. You just need to own them. But here is the problem. The word sex slave appears exactly 0 times in the entire Quran. If the Quran is a book of justice and mercy, why do the holy books of men sound like a manual for human trafficking? Today, we are deleting 12 centuries of brainwashing. We are going to look at the verses they twisted, the hadiths they used to justify it, and the rulings of scholars that legalized crime and immorality. This is going to be hard, so if you are weak-stomached or get disgusted easily, then I suggest you don't watch any further. In the earliest legal repositories, like Ibn Abi Shayba's Al-Musannaf, we find reports that would make any sane person sick. They describe the inspection of slave women in the markets. Reports attributed to Omar al-Khattab claimed he would uncover parts of their bodies, touch them in places, and examine them by hand, and assessed for physical maturity and reproductive capacity, all without consent. The Maliki and Hanbali schools codified this. Their manuals explicitly state that a buyer can look at and touch a slave woman in ways that are strictly forbidden with free women. Why? Because in their eyes, she isn't a human soul, she is mal, property. Ibn Hazm, one of their most famous jurists, was shockingly blunt. He argued that the entire body of a slave woman could be seen and touched because she is property. There is no moral reasoning here. It is pure human commodity logic. Think about that. They describe touching limbs, checking breasts for firmness, and assessing hips for childbirth potential, all without the woman's consent. They justify this by saying it's not lust, it's commercial inspection of goods. They treated human beings like livestock. They even report that slave women were forbidden from covering up. While the Quran commands modesty, these jurists claim slave women were punished for covering up. Why? To differentiate them from free women and to signal their sexual availability in the market. This isn't just history. These reports, even the weak ones, were used as legal precedents. They let the supposed actions of companions override the clear ethics of the Quran. They turned the welfare system into an app for hooking up for men who wanted to hoard women. Sahih Muslim says the companions captured women at Audas whose husbands were still alive, but hesitated. Then allegedly a verse was revealed just to tell them, go ahead, they are your property now. Another hadith even discusses allowing azl, withdrawal, because they were having sex with these captives and didn't want to get them pregnant. Is this how the Prophet was explaining the Quran as many of the hadithists claim? How to commit rape and adultery. This isn't Islam, this is a crime scene. The scholars say, ownership makes sex lawful. I challenge you, show me one verse in the Quran that allows this. It's just not there. They had to write their own books to fill in the blanks where the Quran refused to bend to their whims and desires. So, what does Ma Malikat Amanakum actually mean? In plain English, those under your contractual care, those to whom you are a guardian and protector. It's about responsibility. In a time of war and social collapse, you had refugees and orphans who lost everything. The Quran didn't tell men to exploit them. It told men to protect them. If you think this phrase is about sex, look at chapter 16, verse 71. The Quran uses the exact same phrase, Ma Malikat Amanakum, to describe the people who receive your zakat and charity. Ask yourself, do you give charity to a sex slave? No. You give it to a dependent. You give it to a refugee. The Quran is building a social welfare system for the vulnerable, and the scholars turned it into a menu for sexual opportunism. They turned the commandment of protection into a license for exploitation. Look at chapter 4, verse 24. This is the verse they abuse the most. They say it means you can have sex with captives. But read the very next sentence. The Quran says if you want to be with these women, you must marry them. You must give them their dowry, and you must seek the permission of their people. If they were slaves, why would you need permission? Why would you pay a dowry to property? You don't pay a dowry to a chair or a horse. The Quran calls these women nafs, a soul, insan, a human, and mominat, believers. Never once does God call them objects. The Quran came to end exploitation, not to regulate it. When you strip away the culture and the centuries of lusty old men justifying their own desires, the truth is simple. There is no sex slavery in the Quran. There is no free sex with captives. If you believe that God allows rape because of a war captive status, you aren't following the Quran. You are following the evil desires of men who lived 1,200 years ago. Stop looking at the man-made books for permission to be cruel. Stop insulting the Prophet and his companions. The Quran is a book of protection and justice. If you want the truth, you have to be brave enough to close these manuals and open the Word of God, because the truth is right there, and it has been there the whole time. The only real slavery here is yours to your scholars. Read the Quran and think for yourself.